Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Aubrey and I am the crazy bearded dragon girl. Today I'm going to share with you all the different feeder insects that you can feed to your bearded dragon. And also I'm going to share the nutritional content of each one and also the pros and cons. And I will give an overall rating of each feeder insect. So bearded dragons are omnivores. So they eat insects and plants. And I'll do a separate video talking about the different plant greens, vegetables that you can feed to your bearded dragon. But this video is focused on the feeder insects. So the first feeder insect we are going to talk about are crickets. So crickets are one of the most commonly found and popularly used feeder insects for your bearded dragon. So let's look at the nutritional content of crickets for your bearded dragon. They have 15% protein, 77% moisture, 3% fat, and 275 milligrams of calcium. So now let's look at the pros and cons of using crickets. There are a lot of pros when it comes to using crickets. They are high in protein and also low in fat. They are cheap and readily available. They're also a bearded dragon favorite because they hop away, they're quick moving, and so it really entices your bearded dragon to go after it and stimulates their hunting instinct. They come in all sizes, so there's very small crickets and larger crickets for all ages of bearded dragons. And the cons of using crickets are they can chirp and make loud noises in your house. They can be hard to keep alive. And even when you feel like you're doing absolutely everything to make them happy, they can still just die for what appears to be no reason. And also, they can be hard to catch. I have my little tweezer things to catch them, and it is a struggle more so than any other feeder to catch them. And they can also escape in your house and hop all around, which has definitely happened to me. The overall rating I would give to crickets is a 4 out of 5. The next feeder we're going to talk about are mealworms. So let's look at the nutritional content of using mealworms. Mealworms are 18% protein, 61% moisture, 13% fat, and they have 169 milligrams of calcium. So now let's look at the pros and cons of using mealworms. The pros are they are readily available, they're easy to find, they are very inexpensive, and unlike crickets, they are easy to keep. They don't die very often or very easily. Usually you just keep them in whatever little cup or container they come in, and they live just fine. You don't really have to do anything to keep them alive. And they're also easy to breed. I am currently working on breeding mealworms, and it is very exciting. And they have a high protein content. Some of the cons of using mealworms are they have a low calcium content. They are harder to digest for your bearded dragon, and they also are smaller in size. So they only get to a certain size and then they turn into beetles. And you can get giant mealworms, which have been given a certain chemical to prolong their pupation. But in general, they only get so big. Overall, I am going to give them a rating of 3.5 out of 5. The next feeder we are going to talk about are superworms. So let's look at the nutritional content of superworms. Superworms have 19% protein, 57% moisture, 17% fat, and 177 milligrams of calcium. So now let's talk about the pros of using superworms. They are high protein feeders for your bearded dragon. They get to a larger size than mealworms, and so they are better for bigger sized bearded dragons. They also are a more active moving worm. So even if your bearded dragon is not very enticed by worms in general, they may be enticed by superworms because they are more fast and active moving. And they're easy to keep like mealworms. You just keep them in a cup with however they come, and generally they stay alive just fine. The cons of using superworms: they are high in fat and they're also low in calcium. They are good to add variety, but also not good as a sole staple option. The overall rating I would give to superworms is also a 3.5 out of 5. Next, we're going to talk about black soldier fly larvae. They're also called phoenix worms, calcium grubs, lots of different names, but they are all black soldier fly larvae. So let's look at the nutritional content of those. They are 17% protein, 61% moisture, 14% fat, and their calcium content is 9,340 milligrams. So the pros of using black soldier fly larvae: they are extremely high in calcium content, and if you are feeding them these, there is no need to dust them with calcium. They are easy to digest for your bearded dragon because they have a softer exoskeleton, and they're also very easy to keep. The cons of using black soldier fly larvae are they only get so big. So I believe they only get to 3/4 of an inch to maybe an inch, and then they turn into flies. But you can also feed the flies to your bearded dragon, and it can be fun for them to leap and catch them. Melon just caught one today, and he's probably my best bearded dragon at catching them. They're also not as readily available. I've had to order them online when I want to have black soldier fly larvae, and they can be more expensive than the previous options we've already talked about. Overall, I will give them a rating of 4.5 out of 5. Now let's talk about roaches. So, the common roaches for your bearded dragon are dubia roaches, but if you live in Florida like me, it's illegal to get dubia roaches here. And we have to use discoid roaches, but their nutritional content is very, very similar. But for the sake of this video, we are going to look at the nutritional content of dubia roaches because they are the most common, and as long as you don't live somewhere where they are illegal, you will probably be getting dubia roaches. So let's look at the nutritional content of dubia roaches. They are 20% protein, 66% moisture, between 3 and 7% fat, and 700 milligrams of calcium. So the pros of using roaches are they have a really high nutritional content. All around, they have very good nutrition for your bearded dragon. They are easy to keep and also easy to catch, unlike crickets, and they are an active moving insect. So your bearded dragon is going to want to chase them and catch them. And the cons of using roaches are they can be more pricey than other options, and they're also not as readily available. The rating I am going to give to dubia/discoid roaches is 4.5 out of 5. They are an all-around favorite and wonderful for your bearded dragon. So the next 3 feeders we're going to talk about are actually treat feeders and not really used daily, but more so just as a treat. And I'm also not going to give them a rating because it just didn't make sense to me to rate them in the same way that I was rating the staple feeders. But I will share with you the nutritional content and the pros and cons of them. The first treat feeder we will talk about are silkworms. And my bearded dragons love silkworms. I would say they are their absolute favorite worm, hands down. So the nutritional content of silkworms they are 9% protein, 82% moisture, 1% fat, and 177 milligrams of calcium. So the pros of using silkworms: they are easy to digest for your bearded dragon. They have a very soft exoskeleton. They are very low in fat and also very high in moisture. And they are a beardie favorite. Even Melon, who doesn't like any other worm, will not touch a worm to save his life. He loves silkworms. So once or twice a month, I will buy a pod of silkworms and just feed them off until they're gone. Maybe one a day, a few a week, whatever. And the cons of using silkworms are they can be more pricey. They are around $1 a silkworm. Depending on where you're getting them from, they can be not as widely available. The next treat feeder we're going to talk about are hornworms. And hornworms are also a bearded dragon favorite. They're those little blue worms that you might see at the pet store or in videos of people feeding to their bearded dragons. And they're really good to give to them periodically. So let's look at the nutritional value of hornworms. They are 9% protein, 85% moisture, 3% fat, and 464 milligrams of calcium. So the pros of feeding them hornworms are they are very high in moisture and are very good for hydrating and making sure your bearded dragon is hydrated. They also have a high calcium content and they are easy to digest for your bearded dragon. The cons of using hornworms are they can be pricey and also they grow extremely fast. So if you get a container of hornworms, make sure you feed it to your bearded dragon as quickly as possible. And the last treat feeder we are going to look at are waxworms. So let's look at the nutritional content of waxworms. They are 14% protein, 58% moisture, 24% fat, and 243 milligrams of calcium. The pros of using waxworms are that they are good for weight gain. So maybe you got a rescue bearded dragon that was underweight. This would be a great time for waxworms because it will help them put on weight. They're very high in fat. But if you have a more overweight bearded dragon, you definitely don't want to feed them waxworms very often. They can also stimulate an appetite for a bearded dragon that maybe has been having a low appetite. And the cons of waxworms is that they are extremely high in fat content. So those are the feeder insect options for your bearded dragon. I hope that this video was helpful for you to understand the nutritional content of each one and make the best decision for your bearded dragon. In general, it is best to feed your bearded dragon a variety of different feeders and not just one because they are getting different nutrition. And in the wild, they are catching all different types of insects. So it is really good to have a variety in their diet to get the most nutrition possible. Like this video if it was helpful for you and subscribe if you're not already. And I will see you in the next video.